The email chime didn't just sound. It screamed a jarring, over-caffeinated jingle from my laptop speakers. I flinched, instinctively lifting my hand to the throbbing behind my right eye. It was the kind of migraine that starts deep in the neck and crawls up, a physical manifestation of the stress that had been my constant companion for the last decade and a half. But the subject line stopped the pain, if only for a second. Final round interview. Partner, Capital Markets Division. This wasn't just another rung on the corporate ladder. This was the stratosphere. This was the ultimate validation of 15 years spent tethered to my desk, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the desperate desire for financial certainty. It represented the seven-figure security blanket I wanted for my own small family, my husband, Ethan, and our 4-year-old son, Finn. Speaking of Finn, a dry, rattling cough sounded from the monitor I had set up next to my ergonomic chair. He'd been home from preschool for 2 days now, burning through a stubborn fever that seemed determined to derail my entire quarter. Ethan, bless his logical software engineer heart, had already burned through his last 2 personal days covering the initial 48 hours. Now the baton and the anxiety was passed back to me. Juggling a sick toddler and a financial firm's year-end crunch is difficult. Juggling a sick toddler and the single most critical job interview of your career, scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. in a sterile, high-rise boardroom? That's not difficult. That's impossible. I couldn't bring Finn. A 4-year-old, even a quiet one, would shatter the glacial calm required to close a multi-million-dollar deal, let alone land a partnership role. Rescheduling was out of the question. In this tier of finance, the firm sets the time, and you show up or you vanish. There was only one option. My parents, Carol and Robert. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Mom. The familiar acidic anxiety coiled in my stomach, a knot I'd been carrying since high school. It was the preemptive brace for disappointment, the psychological preparation for the inevitable sigh, the veiled resentment that accompanied every request. But I forced myself to take a deep breath, looking around my home office in our beautiful colonial home in Connecticut. This is different, I told myself. This isn't a handout. This is family reciprocity. I wasn't my younger sister, Scarlett, the sensitive artist who constantly needed bailing out. I was Audrey, the competent one, the one who had literally bought and paid for their worry-free retirement. I thought about the details. Their house in suburban Florida, debt-free, nestled near the golf course. I had paid off the $500,000 mortgage 5 years ago when their adjustable rate nearly bankrupted them. A crisis brought on, predictably, by funding Scarlett's self-discovery journey in Europe. I didn't just pay it off. I bought the house, put it in a family trust, and allowed them to live there rent-free, provided they stuck to the rules and the generous $6,000 monthly stipend I set up. Their pearl-white Mercedes S-Class sedan, a corporate lease under my firm, paid by me. They weren't struggling. They were living a life of leisure entirely funded by my hustle, asking for 3 hours of their time. 3 hours during which Finn would likely just nap was the most basic, reasonable request a daughter could make. I tapped the screen. It rang twice. Audrey, what's wrong? Her voice was instantly sharp, laced with the ingrained assumption that my call meant trouble, a sudden expense, or a new crisis that only I could solve. Hi, Mom. Nothing's wrong. Actually, I have great news. I'm in the final round for a partner position at the firm next Tuesday. I tried to inject as much enthusiasm as I could, hoping to disarm her with pride. There was a noticeable pause. Oh, that's nice, dear, she finally said. The disinterest was palpable, hitting me like a physical, damp weight. Your father and I were just about to head out. We're looking at that new wrought iron patio set for the lanai. That's wonderful, Mom. I lied smoothly, remembering the oversized check I'd written last year to have their pool resurfaced, an expense she deemed absolutely essential for entertaining. So, the interview is next Tuesday, 10 a.m. sharp. Ethan is out of leave, and I truly, deeply need to be there. I was hoping you and Dad could fly up and watch Finn for just a few hours. Just 3 hours, maximum. He's just got a mild fever now, nothing contagious. The silence that followed was agonizing. I could hear a daytime talk show faintly in the background, likely playing on the flat-screen TV I'd bought them for Christmas. I pictured her standing in the sleek, remodeled kitchen, the one I had paid to upgrade with custom quartz countertops, a look of profound, put upon inconvenience already etched on her face. "Tuesday," she finally drawled, stretching the word out as if I had asked her to run a marathon in a blizzard. "At 10. "Yes," I said, my voice shrinking despite my efforts to sound confident. "It's the only time they had." And then she laughed. It wasn't a kind, warm, maternal sound. It was a short, sharp, incredulous scoff, the kind you reserve for someone who has committed a social blunder of the highest order. It was the sound that signaled the line had been crossed, but not by me. "Audrey, you can't be serious," she said, her voice laced with an almost breathtaking level of contempt. "Your father has his Tuesday morning golf game, and I have my book club luncheon. We're retired. We're not your nannies." The words echoed in the quiet of my home office, sharp and cold as shattered glass. I froze, the breath catching in my throat. "We're not your nannies." It wasn't just the refusal, it was the contempt. It was the reduction of my 15-year climb to a career milestone into an annoying scheduling conflict. It was the implication that I, the daughter who had single-handedly secured their comfortable, sun-drenched retirement, was treating them like hired help simply by asking for one single, 3-hour favor. I sat there, the shock slowly giving way to a cold, hard, righteous anger. The migraine, momentarily forgotten, was back, pounding with the realization that this wasn't about Finn. This was about their profound, unshakable sense of entitlement. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as their utility, their endless, emotionless bank account. They had just insulted their sole benefactor, and in my world, that was the ultimate breach of contract. A breach I knew exactly how to handle. This was no longer a family matter. This was now a hostile negotiation, and I had all the leverage. I just needed to start using it. The silence stretched for a beat too long, a dangerous void that Carol, my mother, was used to filling with her own self-pity or self-importance. But this time, I didn't rush to apologize, to smooth things over, or to find a softer way to ask. I just listened to the echo of her words. "We're not your nannies." In that moment, the entire structure of our relationship, the load-bearing wall I had been for the family since I was 10 years old, didn't just crack, it dissolved. I was no longer Audrey, the daughter seeking comfort. I was Audrey, the partner track executive, analyzing a colossal, unforced error by the opposing party. I remembered the frantic phone call 5 years ago, the one where they were weeping, panicked about the ballooning interest rate on their mortgage, facing foreclosure on the home where I'd grown up. I recalled the grueling weeks I spent building spreadsheets, liquidating my personal investments, and ultimately sacrificing the entire bonus Ethan and I had earmarked for our own down payment just to wipe their $500,000 debt clean. I hadn't just saved their house. I had saved their dignity, and in their social circle, that was everything. I pictured Robert, my father, now, likely somewhere near the pool, ready to leave for his Tuesday golf game, a pastime he could only afford because of the generous, monthly stipend I provided. I remembered the gleaming, pearl-white Mercedes S-Class parked in their driveway, a car I leased through my firm's corporate account because, as Robert had put it, their old sedan was embarrassing to park next to the neighbors' luxury vehicles. And then there was Scarlett, my creative sister, who hadn't called them on their last 2 birthdays, but who, inexplicably, still received a monthly allowance from them, an allowance I was almost certain was secretly funded by me. The financial drain was constant, but I had always rationalized it as the cost of peace, the tax on my own success. "Audrey, are you there?" Carol's voice cut through my thoughts, impatient, demanding an answer, demanding my surrender. "You'll just have to reschedule your little meeting, or have Ethan handle it. That's what husbands are for." Reschedule my little meeting. The casual dismissal of the most important professional milestone of my life, a role that would secure their financial future tenfold, was the final insult. It was so completely oblivious, so steeped in self-absorption, that the anxiety I was wrestling with suddenly vanished, replaced by the deep, crystalline calm I usually reserved for hostile takeovers. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice unervingly steady, lacking any inflection of hurt or anger. It was purely factual. "You are absolutely right. You are not my nannies." I didn't list the mortgage, the car, the stipend, or the years of sacrifice. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just let the statement stand alone, a period at the end of a relationship contract that had just been unilaterally breached by them. "Audrey, don't be ridiculous. I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it down or throw it across the room. I placed the phone gently back on the desk pad, the action deliberate and final. I sat there for a long minute, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing of Finn on the monitor. The silence of the house pressed in, no longer quiet, but heavy with unsaid words and unaddressed years of resentment. The migraine was still there, but it was distant now, overshadowed by the absolute clarity of my path forward. I had spent my entire adult life trying to manage their existence while maintaining the facade of a loving, dutiful daughter. But in one short, contemptuous phrase, they had shattered the illusion. They had redefined our terms of engagement. They weren't family offering reciprocity. They were beneficiaries demanding their due and insulting the provider in the process. The realization was a sharp, clarifying break. They were dependents who had just mistaken my generosity for obligation. And I, the financial executive, the one who lived and breathed leverage, had been foolishly allowing emotion to cloud the balance sheet for too long. I picked up the phone again. My first call was not to try and fix things or to call Ethan in a panic. It was to the elite care service, the kind that caters to C-suite executives, high-stakes crises, and costs a prohibitive amount per hour. I booked a bonded, impeccable caregiver for Tuesday morning. The fee was astronomical, a week's worth of my parents' monthly stipend, but I paid it instantly without a blink. My second call was to my lawyer, Liam, a senior partner I trusted implicitly. "Hi, Liam," I said, my voice cool and purely professional. "I need you to draw up some documents immediately. We are making some substantial changes to the Carol and Robert Family Trust. As of today, I am initiating a full, formal review of the terms. Effective immediately, I need you to halt the next stipend payment and prepare to fully restructure the asset model." The betrayal of that Nannies comment was worse than the insult. It was the abrupt, crushing realization that I had never been enough for them. Only my money was. They saw my success not as a gift for them, but as a utility for their use. And that realization, that cold, hard truth, fueled a resolution that was now completely without mercy, entirely without regret. They had asked for a transaction. Now they were going to get one. When I finally hung up with Liam, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The cold knot of anxiety was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady thrum of power. It was the feeling I recognized from the close of a massive deal, the moment after the opposing counsel has made a fatal error, and you know you're about to execute the perfect countermove. Ethan came in a few minutes later, having heard the low, intense cadence of my call with Liam. He saw the set of my jaw and the unnerving calm in my eyes. He didn't ask what had happened. He asked how bad. She said, "We're not your nannies," I relayed, my voice flat, empty of emotion. And she told me to reschedule the final partner interview. Ethan, who rarely raises his voice, started pacing the room. His software engineer mind, logical and uncompromising, had long been weary of my parents' entitlement, but he had always respected my loyalty, my decades-long effort to keep the peace. "After everything, Audrey?" he asked, running a hand through his hair. "After the mortgage? After the Mercedes S-Class? And Scarlett, don't even get me started on Scarlett." He stopped, his eyes softening slightly as he took in my exhausted, yet resolute expression. "What did you do?" "I booked Mrs. Gable from Elite Care for Tuesday," I said, listing the facts like bullet points on a slide. "And I called Liam. I've paused the next stipend payment pending a full administrative review of the trust." Ethan stared at me for a long moment, and then a slow, almost reluctant smile spread across his face. "Good," he finally said, the single word of validation feeling like a life raft in a turbulent sea. "It's about time. What about the car?" "One thing at a time," I replied. "I need to think. I need to review the entire structure. They've confused a gift with an entitlement, and now they need a financial education." My migraine, which had momentarily receded in the heat of the decision, came roaring back, but I focused on the contrast. The casual cruelty of my mother's words versus the small, trusting face of my son, Finn, sleeping peacefully in the next room. I had built a fortress of financial security around Carol and Robert, and they had just lobbed a grenade back at me from the presumed safety of its walls. The immediate aftermath was deceptively quiet. I went about my business, preparing for the interview with a focus I hadn't possessed in years. But the emotional warfare began the next morning. The phone rang precisely at 9:05 a.m. It was Carol. I stared at the screen, watching her name flash. My heart thumped, but the resolve I had forged the day before held firm. I let it go to voicemail. Her message, which I played back later, was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. "Audrey, darling, just calling to see how little Finn is feeling. I hope you weren't too upset yesterday. You know how Tuesdays are, so hectic. Your father and I were thinking perhaps we could take Finn for ice cream next weekend, if he's better. It's just your timing was so poor. Anyway, call me back. We need to discuss the new luxury outdoor grill Robert is looking at for the deck." Not a word of apology for the insult. Not a hint of reconsideration. Just a complete, oblivious steamroll over the entire incident, ending with a brazen request for yet another purchase, another financial contribution. The nerve, the pure, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. I deleted the message without replying. She called twice more that day, then switched to a barrage of texts. I ignored them all. Late that afternoon, I was in the kitchen making a simple, restorative chicken broth for Finn when the doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. I glanced through the peephole and saw Robert standing awkwardly on the porch, shifting his weight. He looked less like a retired executive and more like a nervous teenager forced to apologize. He was holding a small, wilting bouquet of grocery store carnations. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. The threshold felt like a crucial boundary. "Audrey," he mumbled, shuffling his feet. He wouldn't meet my eye. "Your mother's worried. You're not answering her calls." "I've been busy, Dad. Finn's sick, and I have a major presentation to prepare for the partner interview." Right, he mumbled, pushing the sad flowers toward me. "These are, well, your mother thought you might like them." I took them, my hands barely brushing his. "Thank you." He lingered, clearly having been sent on a mission he was ill-equipped to handle, his eyes darting to my face, searching for the familiar softness, the compliance he was used to. "Listen, about the other day. Your mother, she's just stressed. The book club, it's her week to host." He tried again, finally meeting my eye, which was cold and unyielding. He was pleading with me to fix it, to smooth it over, to be the one to apologize so they could go back to their comfortable status quo. "How did she mean it, Dad?" I asked, my voice quiet, dangerously calm. He flinched at the question. "Well, you and Ethan make great money. You can afford help. We're retired. We're on a fixed income." The sheer audacity of that statement, delivered by a man standing on the porch of a $500,000 house he didn't own, to the daughter who provided that fixed income, was a physical blow. Their fixed income wasn't a pension. It was a generous, all-inclusive gift designed to give them a life of luxury. "I see," I said, nodding slowly. The ice in my veins spread. "So, because I am successful, I am not entitled to ask my own parents for a simple family favor. But because you are retired, you are entitled to my success. Is that the arrangement?" Robert's face turned a dull, mottled red. "Now, Audrey, that's not what I'm saying. You're twisting my words. We've done our time. We raised you and Scarlett. It's your turn to handle your own responsibilities." "My responsibilities," I repeated, the silence between the words hanging heavy and final. "You've made that very clear. Thank you for clarifying, Dad." He stood there, desperate, sensing the mission was failing. "So you'll call your mother? She's worried sick." "She's not worried, Dad," I corrected him. "She's annoyed that I'm not playing my part. But the rules have changed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." I closed the door, cutting off his confused, sputtering protest mid-sentence. I dropped the wilting carnations directly into the trash. They had forgotten one crucial thing, a mantra I lived by in my professional life. They forgot who holds the leverage. And I was about to remind them in the most financially definitive way possible. The aftermath of Robert's failed emissary visit left me with a strange sense of melancholy, a deeper sadness than the initial rage. It confirmed that the issue wasn't just a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a deep-seated, systemic entitlement. They genuinely believed the money, the house, the car was all theirs, an earned pension for the minimum requirement of raising children. To understand the chill that settled in my heart, you have to understand the fire I spent my entire life building to keep them warm. I was the reliable one. Audrey the planner, Audrey the fixer, Audrey the one who always showed up. My sister, Scarlett, was the opposite, the creative one, the dreamer, the one who perpetually needed protecting. From the time we were children in our modest suburban home in New Jersey, our roles were set in stone. I got straight A's, managed a part-time job at the local diner, and saved every penny to pay for my own first car, a rusty, dented Honda Civic that smelled perpetually of old French fries. Meanwhile, Scarlett declared high school stifling. racked up debilitating credit card debt on vintage clothes, and Mom and Dad co-signed a huge loan for her brand new convertible, a lavish gift for a graduation she barely squeaked through. My parents, Carol and Robert, weren't overtly malicious. They were just weak, easily manipulated by Scarlett's chaotic sparkle and easily reliant on my quiet competence. I was the load-bearing wall, and they just kept stacking the weight on top, never bothering to check if I was cracking. I went to an Ivy League university on a full scholarship, then clawed my way up the corporate ladder in the ruthless world of Manhattan finance. But every promotion, every raise meant a new, larger family emergency I was suddenly equipped and expected to handle. When their roof leaked, I paid for a new one. When Scarlett decided her latest venture was a lifestyle brand and needed a professional camera, drone equipment, and a laptop with video editing software, I was told it was a crucial investment in her future. I paid for that too. Then came the $500,000 mortgage crisis 5 years ago, the one that made me the sole trustee of the family trust. My solution wasn't charity, it was a structure. I essentially bought the house from them for the remaining debt amount, placed it in the trust, and set them up with a generous $6,000 monthly stipend. They called me their savior. Carol cried and said I was the best daughter in the world. A year later, the embarrassing car incident happened. Their old SUV was perfectly safe, but Robert complained that it didn't look right parked next to the neighbors' Land Rovers in a mortgage-free driveway. Carol complained it was unsafe. I relented, arranging the corporate lease for the pearl-white Mercedes S-Class. It was an extravagant, needless concession, but it bought me a temporary moment of silence and the ability to focus on my own life. All this time, Scarlett continued to drift. Her lifestyle brand was a predictable mess of blurry, aspirational photos and vague posts about living authentically, which seemed to translate to charging expensive brunches and spontaneous weekend trips to the credit card my parents were still secretly covering. I had discovered this leak once before and had brutally plugged it, much to Scarlett's fury. She was 34, living in a trendy apartment in Brooklyn she couldn't afford, and she viewed me not as a sister, but as the gatekeeper to the family bank. Scarlett, I realized, was the real invisible antagonist in my life. She was the one who whispered poison in Carol's ear, painting me as the cold, unfeeling moneybags while she was the warm, struggling artist. She was the one who had amplified my parents' worst, most entitled instincts. I remembered a conversation last Christmas. I had arrived, exhausted after closing out a brutal fourth quarter, with thoughtful, practical gifts for everyone. Scarlett arrived 2 hours late, empty-handed, with a dramatic story about her car breaking down. Carol fussed over her, while I sat clearing the wrapping paper. "Audrey, you just don't get it," Scarlett had said, waving a fork dismissively at me. "Life isn't about spreadsheets and stock options. It's about experience. It's about following your calling." "Experience costs money, Scarlett," I'd replied, weary to the bone. "Only if you're as obsessed with it as you are," she'd snapped back. Carol immediately shushed me. "Audrey, don't pick on your sister. She's sensitive." Standing in my kitchen now, having just been called a nanny, it all coalesced. My parents' ingratitude wasn't a sudden development. It was the culmination of a lifetime of enabling Scarlett's irresponsibility while punishing my stability. They hadn't just forgotten my sacrifices, they had started to resent them. My success, which they lived off of, was a mirror to their own failures and Scarlett's inertia. Robert's comment about their fixed income sealed it. They genuinely saw the money as an entitlement, a permanent utility I was obligated to provide. The Nannies comment was just the flare that exposed the whole rotten structure. They had confused the host for the parasite. They forgot who holds the leverage. And I walked back to my office, my resolve no longer just cold, it was righteous. This wasn't about a missed babysitting slot. This was about finally initiating a defense against the hostile takeover of my life. The partner interview on Tuesday was about to get a whole lot easier because I had just finished my most intense preparation. I had detached my heart and armed the trap. The time for sentimentality was over. Tuesday morning dawned with an unnerving, perfect clarity. Finn's fever had finally broken overnight, and he was sitting up in bed, happily babbling to his stuffed sloth. Ethan, bless him, had coffee and a carefully plated breakfast waiting for me, his presence a silent, unwavering fortress of support. "Go get them, partner," he said, giving me a quick, firm kiss. "We've got this end covered." At 9:30 a.m., Mrs. Gable arrived. She was from the Elite Care Service, impeccably dressed, a woman in her late 60s with a kind, professional smile that instantly put Finn at ease. She moved with the quiet competence of a seasoned professional. Finn, sensing the calm, new energy, immediately showed her his prized collection of toy trucks. The cost for her 3 hours of service was jaw-dropping, frankly. It was more than Carol and Robert spent on groceries in 2 weeks. I paid it without a second thought. It was the price of peace, and it was worth every penny. The interview was a blur. It was a rigorous, high-stakes examination from 6 senior partners, filled with complex financial hypotheticals and intense scrutiny. But I was in my element. The glacial calm that had settled over me during the phone call with Carol was now a laser focus. The personal crisis had strangely sharpened my professional edge. When the lead partner, a formidable woman named Cynthia, asked how I handled high-pressure conflicts and emotionally charged negotiations, I almost laughed at the irony. "I believe in clear, direct communication," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "I identify the core issue, assess all available leverage, and restructure the terms of the engagement. I never let emotion cloud a negotiation. I stick to the facts and the written agreement." Cynthia smiled, a slight, knowing curve of her lips. "And what happens when the other party is unreasonable or attempts to revert to emotional appeals?" "Then I allow them to experience the natural consequences of their position," I replied, the truth of the statement resonating deep in my core. "I find that reality is the most effective negotiating tool." I walked out of that boardroom, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I knew I had nailed it. The weight of my parents' expectations, which I hadn't even realized I was still carrying, was gone. I had spent so long managing their finances to protect them from reality. Now, I was using that same skill to protect myself from them. But the shift from passive victim to active strategist was not yet complete. I had only set the first part of my plan in motion. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Liam. "The review is complete, Liam," I said. "I've decided to restructure the trust. We're moving from a stipend model to a reimbursement model. Effective immediately, Carol and Robert will submit all receipts for essential living expenses, utilities, property tax, homeowners insurance, groceries. I will review and approve them personally. The discretionary fund is closed." "Audrey," Liam said, a note of caution in his voice, "that's a significant change. They're going to feel that. They won't be able to spend $6,000 on whims anymore." "That is the intention," I said. "They've become confused about the difference between a gift and an entitlement. I'm providing a financial education." "And the other matter?" he asked, referring to the S-Class. "I'm handling that one myself," I said. The Mercedes S-Class lease was not in their name. It was a corporate lease under my own consulting firm, a perk of my partner track position. I was the sole signatory and my parents were merely listed as permitted drivers. I opened my laptop and logged into the leasing company's corporate portal. I navigated to the Manage Vehicle page. I clicked Terminate Lease. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure? Early termination. Fees may apply. I clicked Confirm. A new window opened. Please select a date for vehicle repossession. I selected the day after tomorrow, Friday, the 1st of the month. It was the exact day their $6,000 stipend, the one that wasn't coming, was usually deposited. Crucially, it was also the day of Carol's Big Book Club luncheon, the event that was so important she couldn't possibly watch her own grandson. The humiliation would be swift, public, and definitive. But there was one final, more important piece of financial architecture I needed to dismantle. I logged into my parents' shared credit card account, the one I had insisted they keep for emergencies only, and the one I had foolishly linked to my own accounts to cover any shortfalls. I ran a transaction report for the last 6 months. The investigation wasn't difficult. The truth was laid out in a long, damning list of charges. For $150 at a high-end golf pro shop, $900 at a luxury French restaurant, $1,200 at an outdoor furniture retailer, likely for that new grill. All classic discretionary spending, despite their fixed income complaints. But the most staggering charge was a repeated monthly transfer, $2,500 every single month. It was coded simply as rent payment. The recipient was the property management company of Scarlett's Brooklyn apartment. My blood ran cold, the initial rush of anger replaced by a chilling realization. I wasn't just funding my parents' lavish retirement. I was paying my 34-year-old sister's rent. They were diverting a massive chunk of their stipend, my money, to continue enabling her, lying to me about it the whole time. The allowance I thought they were giving her from their own non-existent funds was actually a massive, direct subsidy I was paying. The rage that filled me was pure, sharp, and overwhelming. The "we're not your nannies" line wasn't just an insult, it was a joke. They were, in fact, professional nannies to a fully grown woman, bankrolled by the daughter they refused to help. This wasn't just ingratitude. This was financial fraud. I took a screenshot, downloaded the statements, and attached them to a new email address to Liam. Liam, I wrote, add this to the file. This is grounds for a formal breach of trust. I want all discretionary funds frozen immediately. And one more thing. I need you to draft a new family agreement. I'll be sending you the terms shortly. I closed the laptop. The trap wasn't just set. It was now fully armed, and they were walking right into it. They had forgotten who held the leverage. They had forgotten who I was. And on Friday, they were going to get a painful, very public reminder. Friday, the 1st of the month. D-Day. I had taken the day off, even though the official announcement about the partner role wouldn't be for another 2 weeks. The verbal offer had come through late Thursday afternoon, accompanied by a salary figure that made the elite care nanny fee look like pocket change. Ethan and I had celebrated quietly the night before, a single bottle of good Cabernet marking the start of a new, boundary-enforced chapter of our lives. I felt completely in control, sipping my coffee in the kitchen, watching Finn play with his trains on the floor. I was waiting. My phone started lighting up at 9:05 a.m. It was Carol. I watched it ring. It rang again at 9:07 a.m., 9:08 a.m., and 9:10 a.m. At 9:15 a.m., the text started. Carol, Audrey, our debit card was declined at Whole Foods. The stipend didn't come in. Is something wrong with the bank? Call me immediately. I smiled slightly, taking another sip of coffee. Whole Foods, of course. Nothing but the best for their fixed income. Carol! 9:30 a.m. Audrey, this isn't funny. I'm calling the bank. Your father is very upset. I have my book club today. I need to buy the imported cheeses. What is happening? I decided it was time for the first, small taste of reality. I replied with a single, simple text. Me. There is no issue with the bank, Mom. The stipend is currently under administrative review. I will be in touch when that review is complete. You are on a fixed income, remember? You'll have to manage. Her response was instantaneous, a desperate, frantic flurry of typos. What does that mean, administrative review? You can't do this, I have to buy food, this is ridiculous. The silence that followed was, I imagined, filled with a dawning, horrified realization. The bank was closed. The comfortable safety net they had taken for granted had been yanked out from under them. The main event was scheduled for 11 a.m. I had received a final confirmation email from the leasing company. Our retrieval agent will be at the address between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. to repossess the vehicle. At 11:17 a.m., my phone exploded. It was Robert. I had never heard him sound the way he did. He wasn't sad or confused or even angry. He was hysterical, his voice high-pitched and breaking. Audrey, there's a man here with a tow truck. He's trying to take the car. He says the lease is terminated. You have to call them. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake, Dad, I said, my voice as placid as a frozen lake, betraying nothing. What are you talking about? He's hooking it up. Audrey, your mother's friends are starting to arrive for her luncheon. They're all watching. This is humiliating. Yes, Dad, I confirmed. It is. Do something, he shrieked. I am doing something, Dad, I said, resting my hand on Finn's soft hair as he rolled a toy train across the floor. I'm handling my own responsibilities. Remember? You told me it was my turn. I heard a muffled sound, and then Carol's voice, shrill with panic and indignation, cut through the line. Audrey Elizabeth, you stop this right now. That is our car. You can't just take it. That's where you're mistaken, Mom, I said, finally letting the ice in my voice show. This was the moment of complete, unvarnished truth. It was never your car. It was my car, a corporate asset that I, in a moment of extraordinary foolishness, allowed you to drive. You made it clear on Tuesday that our relationship is purely transactional. Well, the terms of the transaction are no longer favorable to me. What are you? She stammered, the realization finally hitting her like a freight train. I've been reviewing your finances, Mom. The trust's finances. It's fascinating reading. Did you know you're spending $2,500 a month on Scarlett's rent? The line went dead quiet. All I could hear was the faint, high-pitched whine of the tow truck's hydraulic lift in the background. How did you? Carol whispered, her voice suddenly small, desperate and completely broken. You used the emergency credit card I pay for, I stated. You've been lying to me for years, defrauding the trust one set up to protect you, all to fund your 34-year-old daughter's lifestyle, the same daughter who can't be bothered to call you on your birthday. Meanwhile, you, who are living rent-free in a house I own, driving a car I pay for, and living off a stipend I provide, couldn't find 3 hours to watch your own grandson so I could secure my family's future. I let the words hang there, heavy with years of suppressed resentment. This was the first confrontation, the first complete reveal of their deep-seated betrayal. "Audrey, you don't understand," Carol whispered, grasping at the last shreds of an excuse. She was going to be evicted. She's sensitive. She can't handle stress like you can. "I don't care," I said. The words were freeing, absolute. "I'm done. I'm done being the responsible one. I'm done being the bank. The stipend is frozen. The car is gone. Welcome to your fixed income, Mom. I hope the book club enjoys the catered lunch you probably planned but can no longer afford." I hung up. I knew the reaction wouldn't be remorse. It would be fury, and I was ready for it. The first domino had fallen. The lies were exposed. The supply line was cut. The silence that followed was the sound of their carefully constructed, entitled world collapsing in on itself. The immediate aftermath was exactly as predicted. A poorly executed, emotionally charged siege. Within 5 minutes of me hanging up, my phone rang. It wasn't Carol or Robert. It was Scarlett. "Audrey!" she spat, no pretense of sisterly affection in her voice. "What did you do? Mom is hysterical. You took their car. Are you insane?" "Hello, Scarlett. Nice of you to finally call me," I said, my tone deliberately breezy, as if discussing the weather. "You can't just cut them off. That's their money. They're retired." "It's my money, Scarlett, and I'm especially interested in the $2,500 of it you've been receiving every month. Tell me, how's that lifestyle brand working out? Does living authentically cover your rent? Or is that my job too?" Her jaw dropped. I could hear her gasping, cornered. "Mom told you?" "She offered. I didn't ask." "You're a liar," I said, my voice flat professional. "And you're a thief. You've been complicit in defrauding a family trust. I wonder how that would look on a credit report, or perhaps a small claims court filing. $36,000 in 2 years, Scarlett. That's not a favor. That's grand larceny." You wouldn't," she whimpered, her bravado evaporating instantly, replaced by genuine fear. "Try me," I said. "I've been a financial analyst for 15 years. I've built entire cases against corporate fraudsters. You don't even rise to the level of a challenge. You're just pathetic." I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up. The next 48 hours were defined by a relentless, nonstop barrage of emails, text messages, and missed calls. I kept my phone off for most of Saturday, letting the storm rage. When I finally turned it on late Saturday afternoon, there were 23 missed calls and a string of emails from Carol and Robert. The tone shift was rapid and telling, moving from indignant rage on Friday afternoon to bewildered, desperate panic by Saturday morning. The emails were a roadmap of their collapse. From Carol, Friday, 3 p.m. Subject: "This is unacceptable, Audrey. This has gone on long enough. Turn the car back on. We're going to the bank on Monday to demand you release our money. You have no right. Your father is beside himself. This is an abuse of your power." From Carol, Friday, 9 p.m. Subject: "Please, Audrey. Your father needs his heart medication from the pharmacy. How is he supposed to get it? You took our car. Are you trying to hurt us?" I knew for a fact Robert used a mail-order pharmacy, and his next delivery wasn't for 2 weeks. A desperate, clumsy lie. From Robert, Saturday, 7 a.m. Subject: "Audrey, your mother. Your mother didn't sleep all night. She's making herself sick. This is cruel. We will apologize. We are sorry we couldn't watch Finn. Just please turn the money back on. This is a nightmare." The desperation was palpable, but the evidence I had compiled, the $2,500 rent payments to Scarlett, had fortified my resolve beyond any emotional appeal. This wasn't about a tantrum over a car. It was about years of systematic, deliberate financial deception. The money for Scarlett was the core of the rot. I forwarded the latest, most desperate emails to Liam. "They're starting to bargain," I wrote, "but they still don't understand the gravity. They think this is a tantrum. They don't realize it's a restructuring." "What's the next step?" He replied. "We present the full case," I wrote back. "It's time for the second and final confrontation." I called Robert. He picked up on the first ring, his voice cracking with relief and exhaustion. "Audrey." "Oh, thank goodness." "Dad, listen to me closely. I am willing to have one and only one meeting," I said, my voice all business, cold and unwavering. "You and Mom will come to my house tomorrow, Sunday at noon. You will not bring Scarlett. If you bring Scarlett, I will not open the door, and this conversation is over permanently. Do you understand?" "Yes. Yes, of course, Audrey. Anything," he babbled. "We'll be there. Thank you." I hung up, feeling nothing but a weary certainty. Their defeat was now complete. They had no leverage, no resources, and no car. They would have to rely on a ride-share service to get to my house, a fitting symbol of their complete dependence on services they could no longer afford. The stage was set for the final, brutal act of negotiation, and I had already drafted the one-sided, non-negotiable contract they would sign. This wasn't about vindication. It was about finally, definitively securing my own family's peace. Sunday arrived, the air thick with tension. Ethan was there, standing with me in the living room. He had insisted on being my silent support, a grounded presence to keep me from wavering. I hadn't dressed in my typical business attire. I wore simple jeans and a dark turtleneck, projecting an image of quiet, unshakable strength rather than corporate power. Exactly at noon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Carol and Robert looked utterly wrecked. Carol's eyes were puffy and red, her face pale and drawn beneath her expensive, unwashed hair. Robert looked like he had aged 10 years since our phone call, his golf shirt wrinkled, his usual easy confidence completely gone. They were no longer the smug, entitled retirees from Tuesday. They were simply two defeated, exhausted older people. I didn't offer a hug or even a handshake. I didn't offer coffee or water. "Come in," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. I led them to the living room, where Ethan stood and simply nodded in greeting. I motioned for them to sit on the sofa opposite me and Ethan. "Audrey, honey," Carol began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "We're so sorry. What I said, it was a horrible, stupid thing. I was stressed. The book club, it was just Stop, I cut her off. My voice was low, controlled, and absolute. "I'm not interested in excuses or apologies that are only offered when the money stops flowing. This meeting isn't about your feelings. It's about the facts and the legal reality of your position." I motioned toward the coffee table. I had laid out 3 documents in a neat, clinical line. What is this?" Robert asked, his voice trembling. "This," I said, tapping the first document, which was the printed-out credit card statement, "is the record from the emergency credit card. The one I pay. The one that clearly shows a $2,500 payment to a property management company in Brooklyn every single month for the last 2 years. That's $36,000 for those of you who aren't counting." Carol let out a small, strangled gasp, her face going sheet white. Robert stared at the document, his hands shaking as he reached for it. "This," I continued, tapping the second document, a dense legal printout, "is the original charter for the Carol and Robert Family Trust. the one you both signed. I'd like to draw your attention to Article 4, Section B. Funds provided by the trust are for the sole and exclusive use of the beneficiaries, Carol and Robert, and may not be transferred, gifted, or otherwise diverted to a third party without the express written consent of the trustee. I looked up, meeting their eyes, my gaze unyielding. The trustee, that's me. You have been in material breach of this trust agreement for 24 consecutive months. You have been defrauding me. It wasn't like that, Carol cried, tears finally springing to her eyes, lunging for the familiar shield of excuses. She's our daughter. She needed help. I am your daughter. My voice cracked, the first show of raw emotion I'd allowed since the phone call. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated pain. I am the daughter you stole from to give to your other daughter. I am the daughter whose son you refused to watch because you were too busy enjoying the life I gave you. I took a deep, shuddering breath, pushing the emotion back down, restoring the glacial composure. And this, I said, tapping the final, thick document, the new family agreement drafted by Liam, is your only path forward. It is non-negotiable. Robert picked up the agreement with a shaking hand and began to read. The terms are simple, I explained, my voice cold again. The trust is dissolved. The house remains in my name. You will no longer receive a stipend, discretionary or otherwise. You will live there rent-free, and I will pay the property taxes and essential utilities directly. That is all. There will be no more discretionary money, no golf trips, no expensive luncheons, no new outdoor grills, and absolutely under no circumstances will one more cent of my money go to Scarlett. Robert's face crumpled as he finished reading the first page. Audrey, there's nothing left. We can't live like this. This is how retired people on a real fixed income live, Dad. I retorted, the cruelty calculated. You wanted to be retired, free of responsibility? This is it. You've done your time, remember. Carol just stared at the document, her mouth open, the full, shocking extent of her downfall finally landing. The comfortable, easy life they had taken for granted was over. Her reaction wasn't to apologize for the fraud. It was to mourn the loss of the money. And that told me everything I needed to know. Suddenly, before anyone could speak, a frantic, desperate pounding erupted on the front door. Mom, Dad, are you in there? Let me in. I know you're in there. It was Scarlett. Robert jumped, startled. Carol's eyes widened with pure panic. Oh no, she must have followed us. You told her you were coming here, I stated, my voice dangerously low. It wasn't a question. Ethan stood up, taking a protective stance in front of me and Finn, who had woken from his nap and was watching the commotion from the hallway, confused. Audrey, I can ask her to leave. Please just, Robert pleaded. No, I said, a terrifying calm washing over me. Let her in. Let's have this all out. Right here. Right now. Ethan opened the door. Scarlett burst in, her face blotchy and furious, clutching her phone. You can't do this. My landlord just sent me an eviction warning. My rent is due. This was the final showdown, the public, humiliating climax of their own making. Scarlett, dear, please calm down, Carol started, wringing her hands, trying to restore the familial facade. I will not calm down. Scarlett shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's trying to ruin my life just because you wouldn't watch her bratty kid for one afternoon. The word bratty hung in the air, aimed at my son. Ethan took a warning step forward, his jaw tight. I simply held up my hand, perfectly terrifyingly composed. "You're right, Scarlett," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "That's exactly what this is about. It's about a 3-hour favor that your mother, who you see standing here, refused to do. She refused because she was busy spending the $2,500 I earn, which she fraudulently siphoned to you, so that you, a 34-year-old woman, can continue to play lifestyle brand owner, while I, a partner at one of the top firms in the city, work 70-hour weeks." Scarlett's jaw dropped. She looked at our parents, the shock of betrayal replacing the shock of eviction. You told her?" "You're sloppy, Scarlett," I said, walking slowly toward her. "You used a card I track. I have every receipt, every transfer. $36,000. That's not a little help. That's criminal. And now the party is over." Scarlett's face, for the first time, registered genuine, debilitating fear. The legal implication of fraud and grand larceny, delivered by a cold, calculating financial executive who knew the law, finally hit her harder than any eviction notice. "Mom, Dad, do something," she pleaded, her voice cracking, turning on the only people who had ever insulated her from reality. "You promised me. You promised you'd keep the money coming." And then the most pathetic and predictable thing happened. Robert, the eternal enabler, the man who had just minutes ago been begging me for forgiveness, turned back to me, his eyes pleading not for himself, but for his favorite child. "Audrey, please," he wheezed, his voice weak and whiny. "She's your sister. We can't let her be homeless. Just one more month. Give her one more month to get on her feet. We'll pay you back somehow." I looked at him. I looked at Carol, who was nodding eagerly, seeing a tiny crack of light, a way to restore the flow of money. This was it, the final, crushing moment of realization. They would never change. They would always choose the bottomless pit of Scarlett's need over my stability and the future of my own son. They would beg, lie, and steal from me to protect her. I laughed. It was a cold, empty sound that didn't reach my eyes. "Pay me back." I asked, "With what? You have no car. You have no income. You have no assets. You have nothing. You are entirely, 100% dependent on my goodwill. And you have just finally exhausted it." I turned to Scarlett, my voice lethal. "You have 24 hours to get out of your apartment, or I will be contacting your landlord directly, informing him that you have been paying your rent with funds obtained through fraudulent means. You will not only be evicted, you will be unrentable." Scarlett let out a sound of pure, animalistic despair, a high-pitched wail of entitlement finally facing accountability. She turned on Carol and Robert, her face contorted in rage. You let her do this. You were supposed to handle her. You promised me." The final, public admission of the conspiracy. Carol crumpled onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Robert just stood there, his mouth open, a broken, empty man. "Scarlett," I said, walking to the front door and pulling it wide open. "Get out of my house." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "I hate you," she whispered. "The feeling is mutual," I said, not flinching. "Go." She ran out the door, a wailing, collapsing storm of her own making, slamming the door shut behind her. I turned back to my parents, who were huddled together on my couch, a pathetic portrait of ruin. "Sign the agreement," I said, my voice void of all emotion, "or I will have you both evicted for material breach of trust by the end of the month. The choice is yours. You are no longer my parents. You are my tenants, and you are on your final warning." Robert's hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. He picked it up and scrawled his signature on the new family agreement. Carol, her face buried in her hands, just nodded, and Robert had to guide her hand to scribble her signature for her. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was the final nail in the coffin of their previous life. "Ethan," I said. He stepped forward and signed as the witness. I took the document, folded it precisely, and placed it inside my briefcase. "You have 1 hour to arrange for a taxi or a ride-sharing service," I said, looking pointedly at my watch. "Then I need you to leave." They didn't argue. They didn't speak. They sat on my couch in silence for 30 minutes, two ghosts inhabiting the beautiful, sunlit room. A Blacktown car, likely a desperate, expensive last-minute call, finally pulled up to the curb. I watched from the window as my two parents, who just 1 week ago were confidently planning a luxury outdoor grill purchase with my money, climbed silently into the back seat. I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, just an absolute empty finality. The long, draining, thankless task of managing their lives was finally, definitively over. I had lost a mother and father, but I had regained myself. The weeks following the confrontation were characterized by a profound, almost disorienting silence. My own house, free from the constant undercurrent of anxiety and manipulation, felt lighter, brighter. I was officially offered and happily accepted the partner position. The demands were immense, but I tackled them with the clear-headed focus I had rediscovered during the crisis. The energy I had previously spent managing my parents' entitlement was now channeled into building my own legacy. The initial fallout from Scarlett was swift and predictable. She imploded. She crashed at a friend's apartment, flooding social media, the very platform she claimed to leverage for her brand, with vague, dramatic, and misspelled posts about family betrayal, narcissistic energy, and financial abuse. When that failed to produce any financial support, she finally did what she should have done 15 years ago. She got a job. I heard through a distant family friend that she was working as a hostess at a mid-level chain restaurant in the city. She sent me one final, rambling email filled with vitriol and empty threats, which I dutifully forwarded to Liam and then blocked her address. She was no longer a concern. My parents, however, fell into a quiet, almost Spartan existence. Their house, the beautiful mortgage-free house in suburban Florida, had become their gilded cage. Without the Mercedes and without any discretionary income, their social life vanished entirely. The golf game ceased. The invitations to the book club luncheons dried up, or perhaps Carol simply couldn't bear to show up without her usual flair and prestige. They were, for all intents and purposes, grounded. The financial boundaries I had set were precise and unyielding. The reimbursement model meant I paid the property tax, the utilities, the necessary homeowner's insurance, and approved their weekly grocery receipts. But if Carol wanted a new pair of designer shoes, or if Robert wanted to replace his worn golf clubs, the money simply was not there. They were forced to budget, to walk, to take the local public bus for errands, and to cook simple, cheap meals. I received a handful of emails from Carol initially, detailing emergencies that were quickly disproven or subtle attempts to guilt-trip me. One email claimed the air conditioning had broken, a genuine crisis in Florida, but a quick check with the warranty company revealed it was fine. They were testing the boundary, trying to find a weak point. I replied simply and coldly, citing the relevant clause in the new family agreement and informing them that any non-essential repairs would be their responsibility. The testing stopped. The contrast between their former life and their current reality was stark. They were forced to face each other without the distraction of consumption, travel, or social climbing. I imagined the silence in that large, empty house and the painful conversations they must have been having. They were no longer being shielded from the consequences of their choices. They were living within the precise boundaries of their true fixed income. For me, the silence was golden. Ethan and I were closer than ever, our shared ordeal strengthening our commitment. We focused on Finn, on our new life as a partner-track family, and on the simple, uncomplicated joys of our life together. The house felt like ours, finally free from the toxic cloud of obligation. However, despite the peace, a small part of me, the human part, felt the profound loss. I hadn't just cut off financial support, I had cut off contact. I worried sometimes about Robert, the weaker of the two, the one who had clearly been manipulated by both Carol and Scarlett. He was a follower, not a leader, and I wondered if he was finally seeing the truth. One quiet Saturday afternoon, about 6 weeks after the confrontation, I was alone in my office, catching up on some light reading, when a thick, oversized envelope arrived in the mail. It wasn't standard business mail. It was a single, page-long letter, handwritten. The address was scrawled, the handwriting clearly Robert's. I opened it slowly, my hand strangely clammy. Audrey, it began. I don't know what to say. Your mother is not doing well. She stays in her room most of the day. This has been harder than I ever imagined. I paused, expecting the inevitable pivot to a plea for money or forgiveness. But the letter continued. But I want you to know one thing. You were right. You were absolutely right. We took you for granted. I let your mother and I let Scarlett blind me. I was a coward. I was not a father to you. I was just a dependent. I am ashamed. I don't ask you to forgive us. I just want you to know that I see now. I see everything. And I am sorry. I truly am. I finished reading the letter, and for the first time since the Nannies comment, I felt a flicker of something other than cold resolve. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the cold emptiness began to recede. It was the first honest thing Robert had ever said to me in my adult life. He was seeing the true consequence of his choices, the loss of his daughter's respect, not the loss of his car. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the profound, humanistic beginning of theirs. He had taken the first step toward self-worth, and that small, difficult act gave me a quiet sense of hope for his future. I didn't reply, but I saved the letter. I had my vindication, and now maybe, just maybe, I could get my peace. Robert's letter sat on my desk for an entire week, a silent testament to the seismic shift that had occurred in our family. I didn't move it, and I didn't reply to it. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a confession, a full admission of moral and emotional bankruptcy. And because it asked for nothing, it meant everything. The letter was long, meticulously penned, suggesting he had spent hours agonizing over the right words. I reread it almost daily, focusing on the human cost of his choices. He detailed in painful clarity how Carol's constant need for social validation and Scarlett's dramatic episodes had created a cycle where he simply defaulted to the path of least resistance, letting me solve every problem with money. He wrote about the humiliation of the car repossession, not because of the loss of the Mercedes, but because of the shame he felt in front of their neighbors and Carol's friends. He spoke about the terror of having to figure out how to navigate public transport for the first time in 30 years, describing a trip to the local supermarket on the bus, where he felt invisible and lost. I realized then, Audrey, that your money hadn't given us freedom. It had bought us a beautiful, hollow prison, he wrote in one particularly crushing paragraph. We didn't know how to live without you managing our lives. We didn't know how to be a husband and wife, just a couple of entitled seniors waiting for their next allowance. I see the look in your mother's eyes now. It's not just anger about the money. It's fear that she doesn't know who she is without the social performance. And I am scared, too. The letter revealed a man finally confronting his own weakness. He had been a successful, respected engineer before he retired early on my dime, but he had allowed his character to atrophy, becoming a secondary enabler to Carol's entitlement and Scarlett's chaos. He had played the victim, the retired man on a fixed income, while enjoying a life of luxury. His admission that he was a coward and not a father was the only form of payment I could accept. It was the first time he had valued truth over comfort. I showed the letter to Ethan. He read it carefully, then simply placed it back on my desk. "It's a start," he said quietly. "It's a realization. He's not asking you to take them back. He's asking you to see him." And that was the difference. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a cash register, but as a person who had been profoundly wronged. The cold emptiness that had been my shield since the confrontation began to recede, replaced by a dull, aching grief, the grief for the father-daughter relationship that could have been, had he made this realization 20 years sooner. I didn't reply because I knew the only meaningful answer I could give wasn't in words, but in continued silence and space. They needed to continue to build their new, authentic normal without the psychological safety net of my immediate response. They needed to find out if they could truly live like this, if they could find contentment in simplicity, or if they would revert to the desperate, entitled people they were. 6 months passed. My new role as partner was incredibly demanding, but I was thriving. I had implemented strict boundaries at work and at home, ensuring I was present for Ethan and Finn. We had found our rhythm, our peace, unburdened by the toxic cloud of external family drama. Finn was growing into a bright, happy little boy, thankfully free from the knowledge of the battle fought on his behalf. Scarlett was still a hostess, still posting vague, dramatic quotes on social media, but her life was stable if basic. The natural consequence I had warned her about was working. She was finally being forced to support herself. I had almost forgotten the intensity of the conflict when, one beautiful Sunday afternoon, I was packing a picnic basket. Ethan, Finn, and I were heading to a local park, one with huge old oak trees and a great playground, our new weekly ritual. My phone, which I now kept on silent most of the weekend, lit up with a text message. It was from Robert. "We are walking to the park near our house now. It is a beautiful day for a walk." A few minutes later, another text arrived. This one contained a picture. It was of Carol. She was kneeling in a public rose garden near their Florida home, a simple municipal park. She was wearing plain clothes, no designer accessories, and she was smiling tentatively at the camera. She looked older and thinner. Yes, but her eyes were clear, and the smile, though fragile, seemed genuine. Not the practiced, performative smile she used for the country club. I stared at the picture, surprised by the sudden, profound warmth that spread through my chest. I showed the picture to Ethan. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his hand resting on my shoulder. I thought for a long moment. I thought about the fraud, the lies, and the years of being taken for granted. And I thought about that one small, honest letter, and the quiet beauty of a woman who had given up her gilded cage to smile at a public rose. They weren't asking for money or a car or even an invitation. They were just sharing a moment of simple, earned peace. They were starting to communicate not as dependents, but as people. I had my vindication, and now, perhaps, I could open the door to a human connection. I looked at the picture of Carol, smiling hesitantly among the vibrant roses, and I saw a woman I hadn't seen in decades. The mother who used to let me help her bake cookies on a Saturday afternoon, before the entitlement had calcified her soul. The picture was an unspoken message. We are okay. We are surviving. And we are finding joy in things that don't cost you money. I thought about the immense psychological distance between that picture and the Nannies comment. The distance represented months of loneliness, forced self-reflection, and the stripping away of a false identity. It was a hard-won victory for them, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit when forced out of its comfort zone. "We're not going to their park," I stated to Ethan, gently running my thumb over the text message. "No," he agreed, "and they shouldn't come to ours. No, that pressure is too much, and I'm not ready for a face-to-face apology tour." The process of healing had to be gradual, built on neutral ground and mutual respect, not on the unequal footing of the past. I texted Robert back. Finn and I are at the playground near the Oak Ridge Bridge. It's a beautiful day here, too. Glad you're getting out. It was a neutral response, offering information without invitation, an acknowledgement of their message without committing to anything further. I put the phone back down and helped Finn strap into his swing. Robert replied almost instantly. "Robert, he looks so big. We miss him." That short text, "We miss him," struck me harder than any detailed apology. Not we miss the stipend. Not we miss our old life. Just we miss him. The simple, devastating truth of grandparental love, finally unmasked from the layer of transactional entitlement. I felt the last of the ice around my heart finally shatter. They weren't cured, and our relationship wasn't instantly repaired. But they were reaching out with a simple human need, not a financial demand. The rest of the afternoon was spent soaking up the sun and watching Finn, but my mind kept returning to the text exchange. I realized that my professional skills, identifying the core issue, assessing leverage, and restructuring the terms, had ultimately saved my sanity. But it was my ability to recognize genuine human change that would save the relationship. The greatest success of my hostile negotiation was not the partner promotion, which I had just secured, but the fact that I had forced my parents to reclaim their own self-worth. By closing the bank, I had forced them to open their eyes. I didn't text again that day. I let the simple, poignant message of "we miss him" linger. That evening, after we put Finn to bed, I sat with Ethan on the porch swing. "What's the next move?" he asked, knowing I always had a strategy. "There is no move." "Not yet," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "The point isn't to control them anymore. The point is to have a relationship with them that is based on love, not money. They have to continue to earn the right to that. Robert's letter and Carol's photo are the down payments." I looked out at the quiet, tree-lined street of our own perfect, hard-won sanctuary. "Maybe," I said to Ethan, thinking of the future, "maybe one day we can have a picnic at a park halfway between our houses. A place where neither of us feels like we are asking for anything or giving anything, just sharing space." It wasn't forgiveness in the dramatic, cinematic sense. It was the quiet, difficult, human start of a reconciliation. I had drawn the boundary, held the line, and walked away with my family and my life intact. The consequences for them were severe, but the resulting peace was priceless. I had my vindication, and more importantly, I had established my life back on a foundation of integrity. 6 months later, the idea of the halfway park became our reality. It was a small, intentional step, a picnic at a state park equidistant from our home in Connecticut and their debt-free house in Florida. No pressure, no demands, just a neutral patch of grass for a few hours. The sight of them pulling up in a modest, older used car they had clearly purchased with the meager savings they were forced to accumulate was jarring. Carol wore simple clothes and no heavy makeup. Robert looked leaner, a little slower, but his eyes were clear and he walked with a new, quiet dignity I had never seen before. When they saw Finn, there were tears, real, honest tears from Carol, not the performative sobs I was used to. There was no mention of the car, the money, the house, or the betrayal. They focused entirely on Finn, listening patiently to his stories about preschool, and Robert even helped him build a surprisingly intricate fort out of fallen branches. We talked about their new life. They spoke about taking long walks, joining a senior community garden, and the surprising peace of not having to chase a social status they couldn't afford. They didn't apologize in a grand speech, but every action was a quiet apology. They had finally realized that the priceless currency of their retirement wasn't the size of my check, but the authenticity of their own lives. The truth is, I realized the greatest gift I ever gave them wasn't the house or the money. It was the harsh, non-negotiable reality of financial accountability. By being the villain, I had saved them from the gilded prison of their own entitlement. My professional network had helped me secure my finances and draw up the legal boundaries that saved my sanity. But it was my own strength, the relentless focus I had developed to climb the corporate ladder, that had saved my family, the one I had built with Ethan and Finn. The resolution wasn't about punishing them. It was about defining my own personhood. I had finally, definitively, stopped being their utility and started being my own person, a partner in my firm, and, more importantly, a secure whole mother and wife. The consequences for them were severe, but the peace it brought to my immediate family was priceless. I had my vindication, and more importantly, I had my life back. And now, they had a chance to build an authentic life of their own. The halfway park wasn't a conclusion. It was a promise that on this new, balanced foundation of respect and earned self-worth, a real relationship could finally begin to grow. Thank you for letting me share this intensely personal, difficult chapter of my life. If there is one piece of advice I can give you, especially those of you navigating similar family dynamics, it's this: your boundaries are not walls, they are foundations. You can only be a lighthouse for others if you don't allow them to flood your own shore. Don't let guilt be the driver of your financial decisions. The highest act of love is sometimes forcing someone to stand on their own 2 feet, no matter how much they resist. I secured my life and career because I finally saw my family's financial issues not as a moral obligation, but as a business problem that needed restructuring. When you approach family entitlement with the clarity of a CEO, you finally gain the courage to execute the non-negotiable choice. I'm curious to know if you've ever had to draw a hard line with family to save yourself. How did you handle it? What was the moment when your own personal integrity finally outweighed your familial obligation? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I hope this story gives you the courage to find your own priceless peace.